to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Thank you for being with us as we talk about the theme of natural resources, their protection, their development, and how they are affecting the planet in the 21st century. As you know, we've talked about in each of our different programs that almost 1/3 of the world's population does not have access to adequate resources of any kind, whether it's water, land, air. And also we're adding to that, and this particular topic is going to be the grasslands. We have a specialist with us, Randy Pheobus, who is CEO and President of the Native Grassland Conservancy. Randy, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Now that's kind of a very sophisticated title, and I know that the slides we're going to be sharing with the public are absolutely fantastic, some of the things that you've been doing. Tell us a little bit about why would you form a group just on grasslands? What does that mean? And then we're going to weave this whole story in as far as how these interrelate with all the other natural resources that are very useful around the globe.
Absolutely. It occurred to me that obviously this part of our ecosystem is part of a bigger system, and through research and exposure to other data, I discovered that this actually happens to be our rarest and fastest declining part of the ecosystem, and I just felt compelled to act to try to understand the problems and then see if we could move it in the right direction.
Yeah, many people think of grasslands as being out in the prairie with in Iowa and Nebraska and Oklahoma heading out to the west coast, but actually there were vast grasslands on the eastern coast of the United States when the first Europeans actually came here. So how do we translate and let people know that you have to have grasslands here as well as other areas around the United States and indeed overseas?
Yes, really I think understanding how they compose an important unit in the bigger system would help people to understand why they're important and exactly how to approach their conservation and preservation. There's obviously, from a biological perspective, a group of species, both plants and animals, flora and fauna, that are the inhabitants of these grassland areas, even if it's not the grasslands of the great expanses such as in the Midwest and in South America and other portions of other continents.
Yeah, like Russia, Mongolia,
yes,
places like that,
certainly,
where they have vast grasslands.
And different kinds of plant communities, but generally the principles are the same. There are species that have adapted to those conditions and those plant communities, and it is important to maintain those kinds of habitats and assemblages of species in order for the system to remain intact.
Well, we're trying to protect the grasslands and, of course, the forest at the same time, and I think you shared with me that it's been a 90% decline as far as the actual acreage, the vast area of the grasslands. Is that correct?
Actually, the statistic was that there are obligate grassland birds specifically this statistic is relevant to the state of Maryland, and the concept of obligate grassland bird means that they require this kind of specialized habitat in order to successfully increase their numbers.
Now, would this be true all over the globe as well? So you have this direct causal relationship between the animals, the birds, and the grasslands?
Sure, and not just birds. Obviously, the birds are part of a system, and they require other species that are also inhabitants of that kind of habitat in our ecosystem. So, so they require insects for feeding their young, and the insects require that kind of habitat in order to reproduce and complete their life cycle. So it's really kind of a elegant organization of natural processes, and that's why one of the reasons why I took an interest and decided to focus on this, and so the obligate grassland birds in Maryland have declined by 90%, which is to me a kind of an alarming statistic. And I thought that since I understood some elements of the problem and wanted to learn more, I thought it would be appropriate for me to start trying to act on those declines and see if we could do something about it.
Well, as we're looking at that, we have this interplay with the grasslands, the forests, and of course now as the globe is at 6.7, 6.8 billion people and growing on a day-to-day basis, there's further and further encroachment on these various lands. What do you think needs to be done, Randy, as far as what can we do to address this issue, and how can we bring this to the forefront as far as conservation and also the environmental integrity of these many different areas?
Yes, I think that's a good question, and part of my efforts involve advocacy and trying to share with people not just from our local area, but anyone that the message can reach, how each of us can act locally, and it's really remarkable how much impact we can have if each of us act locally in our own areas, no matter what continent we're on. Well, and we can make great strides.
And of course, there's people going to be looking at this from various countries around the globe, and so they can look at their own native areas, no matter whether Absolutely. It's in Uganda and Russia, Mongolia, as we talked about, South Africa. Sure. There's many places, the Pampas in South America. So there's virtually every country on Earth has these same challenges because you have increasing populations. You have a decline as far as the rainfall and water that's available to nurture all these areas. So in the studies and the work that you've been doing, Randy Pheobus, what is the interplay that you're seeing between all of these very complex but diverse ecosystems and humankind?
Well, one of the revelations that I think that was the most striking to me was that our local jurisdictions rarely have the resources or staffing to fully address the issues. And I think some of our declines in the local ecosystems and probably it could be analogous to declines throughout across the planet are often due to the inability of the local jurisdictions to manage their resources in a way that is moving them towards conservation and preservation rather than the deterioration and degradation because of outside forces acting, not just anthropogenic, but, well, sometimes humans set in motion other forces, such as the introduction of non-native plant species, and that takes on a life of its own.
And those are quite invasive.
Yes, and it's exponential.
Everywhere. Oh, absolutely. And the whole thing, too, about, as you're bringing in and looking at the flora and the fauna in these various areas, is that much of this is under private control. So you can't just go in and say, okay, we're going to rip out these species, or you can't keep planting the various food stocks that you're putting in. So you have this very delicate balance between public good, public policy, and the interplay of private and free enterprise, particularly in the United States and many of your Western nations.
Yeah, there's an interesting study in that regard that was done in Canada that talked about the production of canola, and the study was a remarkable
Of course, they're using that for biofuels.
Yes,
canola, and also for
human
edible
consumption.
Yes,
absolutely. But the interesting result of that study was that the scientists showed that if the farmers left the outer third of the field unplowed, let it lie fallow, that their production, their crop, would be equal to a field that was farmed all the way to the edges because of the native pollinators' ability to thrive in the outer third that would be unplowed. So that's a remarkable impact.
Randy Pheobus, let's look at some of these slides that you brought with us, because these are absolutely phenomenal, and we'll talk a little bit about the interplay, and we're going to go straight through these. Tell us what is it that we're seeing here, and what is the impact that we have. And it looks like our little buddy here is flying through this area, but talk about this.
Well, part of the idea in these kind of illustrations are to illustrate the relationship between our native species, the flora and the fauna. And this is one of our native dragonflies, and each of them have certain adaptations and require certain conditions. And that's part of what we've undertaken as a nonprofit, is to try to understand their adaptations, their requirements, and try to begin to conserve those elements that will contribute to the thriving of those species.
Well, let's go to this next one. We're going to just march right through here. Tell us what we're seeing now and the impact of what this particular insect has on this ecosystem.
Okay, this butterfly is called the Baltimore checker spot. It is the state insect of Maryland, it happens to be. But it is a good example of the important relationship between plants and butterflies. And this is another obvious illustration between a relationship between the flora and the fauna, the native animals and native plants. And this is a native thistle that is very important to our pollinators that are declining. And this is just another example of a native species of flora, the aster, and a native species of fauna, the butterfly, clouded sulfur, this one is.
Tell us a little about the coloration and why that's important and how that relates to the protection of grasslands and really the entire ecosystem of particularly local communities, both here around the United States and abroad.
Yes, many of these species have very remarkable adaptations, and part of that actually makes it that much more enjoyable for me to be involved in this kind of work, just discovering the difference in the adaptations of different species.
We're going to leave this slide up, but tell us, Randy, in the last about 30 seconds, what would you like to share with our viewing public? What kind of challenge would you like to leave with them, and how they can help in this whole movement here and abroad?
Absolutely. I think the resources are lacking kind of from a public perspective, so each of us can contribute, and if we think about our own homes and the communities from a watershed perspective, from the scale of a watershed, it's way more manageable, and we can all become more informed and contribute by improving those watershed areas.
Well, Randy Pheobus, CEO, President of Native Grassland Conservancy, thank you for being with us. And we thank you, the viewer, for being with us as we talk about these very complex issues. And we look forward to being back with you to share with you more about how we are working hard to develop the Emerald Planet.